Welcome everyone to Real Estate with Gwen Price, and this is part of my series talking to the experts. And I've got with me today Cory Frith with the Buyer's Choice Home Inspection, and we've been doing a monthly discussion, just talking about different topics that come up during home inspections. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is about electrical.
How you doing, Gwen?
I'm doing well. How are you? Been
Doing
busy,
good.
eh? You've had a busy month, and that's a good thing, yeah, because it's been
Yeah,
pretty
well,
crazy.
lots of questions going on out there, that's for sure. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So one of the things I was just mentioning to you is that I get asked, and my clients get sort of concerned when they see an electrical panel with fuses as opposed to the breakers. And I
Yeah.
always kind of try to, calm them down. It's that box has been there for a long time, and insurance companies aren't going to totally wipe it off. But there are concerns when you have fuses as opposed to breakers.
Yeah, it's there's a few, I guess, misconceptions out there with them. Right away, people think we have to upgrade that panel. True, it is an older panel when we see fuses. They're typically over 25 years old or so. But that being said, as long as it's still a 100 amp panel, your insurance companies will have no problem with it. It's when they see 60 amp services that needs to be upgraded.
Yeah, tell me about it. My last little rental there, we thought we had 100 amp for 20 years, and it turned out to be 60 amp service coming into the house because the panel had breakers showed as 100, but it wasn't. So we had to upgrade that for sure.
Yeah, we've seen that trick a few times where the panel is rated for 100 amps. They have 100 amp, but they have still the service coming in from the city still 60. Yeah.
So I learned a lesson there. Do not assume when you see a newer panel the service coming into the house is true to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know when we see fuse panels, the biggest thing I'm talking to the clients about is just safety around the fuse panel. With a breaker panel, the breaker trips, you turn it off, you turn it back on, it's done. With the fuses, yes, you have to unscrew the blown fuse, put in a new fuse. But there's many different types of fuses now. You have your standard fuse that we've always seen for them. And then they have a type D fuse where it's a time delay fuse. So it's great on kitchen circuits where maybe you have a fridge or a freezer or something that takes an initial draw. Those fuses are designed to take that initial draw and not trip or not blow. And then they continue being used, and you use your appliance problem free. And now we even have little fuse breakers. So you screw them in and they have a little push button on the top of them. And that way, when your fuse blows, instead of having to put a new fuse in, you just go and retrip, push that button back in, much like you would a breaker. Where we see problems with fuses, where they kind of get their bad name, I guess, is unlike a breaker panel, when you put in a new fuse, you could put in a 20 amp or 30 amp fuse where it used to be a 15 amp. And that's where we see the problems. That's where now, someone gets tired of keep having to replace that fuse, we go put a bigger fuse in it. Now it doesn't pop anymore. Solve that problem, but now you create a big safety issue because the wires are going to get hot, right? You create a potential fire hazard. And that's where, people get leery about fuse panels. They do make little devices that you can actually thread in. It's like a blocker. So that fuse will only, that block will only accept a certain size fuse.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
So if it's rated for 15 amps, that's all it will accept. If you try and put a 20 or a 30, the backside of the glass fuse won't make the connection inside the panel, so you won't get that power. There are little blockers that you can thread in, and they're rated, right? If it's a 15 amp or if it's a 20 amp, they're different sizes, different thicknesses. And that really is a great safeguard to prevent people from overfusing their fuse panels. It's something that, typically when we see fuse panels, you're going to take a little extra time investigating, making sure they're known for maybe having some scorching or some burn marks. Sometimes people wouldn't tighten things down properly. We'll might see more aluminum wiring in them just based on the age and when we used aluminum wiring in houses. And we're just still looking for aluminum wiring even with breaker panels. We'll often find aluminum wiring in a breaker panel as well. But just like I said, over the time, because we could we found ways to work around some of the electrical problems, and kind of cheat the system in a sense. We create a lot of safety hazards, and now they have that bad name out there. But I'm always telling people, don't be shy of the home because it has fuses. Just learn how it operates, learn to and respect how it was originally wired. Don't overfuse it, and they work just fine. The nice part with a fuse panel versus a breaker panel, you'll always know when you have a bad fuse because it won't work anymore. It blows. Versus a breaker, is it a bad breaker? Because you reset it, you reset it, you reset it. So is it a wiring problem or is it an underperforming breaker? A little tougher to diagnose. So that's one of the positives with fuse panels.
Yeah, well, in a house today I saw had an addition many years ago. So one part of the house was older and it had the fuse panel. The other part of the house had a breaker panel.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming they're serving different areas there, but yeah, we still see lots of houses with fuses. That's for sure. Yeah.
And I know some people will say, well, we need to put a whole new service in. Well, putting a whole new service versus a new panel, they're two different things. Sometimes, you have 100 amp service, so that's fine. Maybe you just want to upgrade your panel so you have more room in it. Or the other option, kind of like what you just mentioned there, is you can put in a sub panel. And that way, it kind of helps reduce the cost as well for the buyer or the current homeowner in upgrading their electrical in their home. So.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just have a drink here.
Yeah, it's been a lot of talking today.
It is water, honestly.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So that's, and then of course, when we're talking about electrical in old houses, I still run across knob and tube, sometimes still connected. Sometimes you just see the little, I guess they're like ceramic up in the rafters of the house and that, but the floor joists rather. But and I know the insurance companies do not like 60 amp and they do not like knob and tube wiring, but it can take a fair amount of work to address that issue of knob and tube wiring.
Yeah, and that's one of the I love old like century style homes. I love inspecting them. There's something I guess have a bit of a soft spot for. But when we're in those types of homes, that's where you're going to find more of that knob and tube wiring, whether it's been removed or there's just evidence of it being there in the past. Like you said, sometimes it's still connected. Often we'll find that it's still connected when we're in attics. We'll find some live knob and tube up in there. And that's why it's so important to be able to get into all those areas of the home when we're doing our inspections, and the importance of even getting the inspection done in the first place to make sure you have that, you're aware of those potential safety concerns. Even in older homes, around water, GFCIs, right? So the receptacles that you'll see commonly in bathrooms or in kitchens, anytime we're near a water source, they should be a GFCI receptacle to give you that added protection, as well as on the exterior of the home. Again, homes that were built in the 80s, often the exterior outlets are just a standard receptacle. So, and that's where the homeowner, they have options, right? So before it was, let's go out and get a new GFCI. Let's have this wired in by an electrician. Your extension cords, outdoor extension cords that have GFCIs built right into them. So that way you don't have to wire in a new receptacle, just use the appropriate extension cord. And that way, if you're doing some yard work or doing some projects, and you're there using some power tools, you still have that protection. You're still grounded, especially when we have wet weather like we did today. If you're out there working after a rainfall, you have that protection when you're working around water.
And what does GFCI stand for? Do you know?
Yeah, it's a ground fault circuit interrupter.
Oh,
so
okay. Yeah.
When we're by the water and you have an appliance or you're using a tool, should it come into contact with water, instead of getting that shock, electrical and water never mix, can be quite dangerous. It'll trip the circuit. It'll cut the power off to the that whole circuit right back to the breaker or the fuse panel.
And now with new construction too, the building code has changed, hasn't it? When you come to talk about a kitchen setup and what's required to to wire in those proper circuits and to make things safe, because you're dealing with a lot of issues in a bathroom and in a kitchen. Right?
Yeah. We have to have GFCIs at those locations now around water. Even now, when you think about other areas around water that we sometimes overlook, it's in the laundry room, where you have a laundry tub, you have your washing machine plugged in, and typically they're plugged into a standard outlet. That should be a GFCI. Sump pumps. Yeah,
right. I never would have thought of that, but
yeah.
You're right. Yeah, there's water there.
They should be into a GFCI as well as in their own dedicated circuit. Often in older homes, code was different back then, and we're not code inspectors, but we do definitely want to have an awareness of it and be able to speak to it to help buyers or current homeowners know how things have evolved, and maybe we can make some simple improvements to make their home safer for them. But back when you had most of your basement was on one circuit and you have your sump pump plugged into that same circuit, well, if the power trips, not only do you have no power in your basement, but you have no power to your sump pump. Pretty important piece to keep your basement dry. You want to make sure you have power to it. So that's why we put them now on dedicated circuits.
Oh, okay. Like when it comes to when we were talking about the knob and tube, what is it about the knob and tube wiring that insurance companies hate? Is it it's a fire hazard? What is it about that?
Yeah, there's potential for fire hazard, especially now it's so old. It's not grounded either. It's just a 2-wire circuit. We didn't have any ground wires in it. And now, speaking about that, it reminds me of the older homes as well in the 40s, 50s, where we had just the 2-prong outlets.
Yeah.
Right. And now, we brought out appliances with the grounded, the 3rd prong, right? The ground prong. And so one of two things happened. Either people cut the ground prong off of their plug.
I was just going to say, I'm sure you've run across that because I've seen it.
Yeah. I remember borrowing some extension cords from my dad and finding those missing too. And like, that's missing. Oh, that's so it fits in the outlet.
Yeah.
But now you lose the protection. Same thing in the house. So the outlets were 2-prong outlets. So people would uninstall them, install a 3-prong receptacle, our standard receptacles today. So things would fit and they would work, but you still didn't have that grounding protection because there was no ground wire from the receptacle back to the panel. Yeah. So we've seen some interesting upgrades back in the day that we're coming across now when we're doing our inspections.
Yeah, well, and using extension cords and cutting the end off and using it as wiring. I mean, you've seen it all, and I've seen quite a bit too, like some pretty interesting things, like amateur electricians, that's a scary thing. I mean, there's lots of risk to that, right? Your insurance company wouldn't be too happy with some of those innovations.
We've all felt that little shock at some point in time.
Oh yeah, I think I was wallpapering once in an apartment and I was cutting around the electrical outlet and stuck the X-Acto knife in the I felt a little bit of a spark. Anyway, there's lots of things on the outside of the house for that we have to be watching out for, including those GFIs and making sure when you're out there doing all kinds of work out there that you do have to be careful what your wiring is.
And now like we've really done, I guess, the way we use our yards, our backyards, side yards. We definitely have gotten into creating more of a living space outside of the home than what we ever have before. And I think the thing to be careful of is too, when we're bringing power out to those locations, we're using the correct wiring. If the wiring we use inside the home, it's not rated to be used outside. It's not protected. It's not in a conduit or an armor sheathed device where it's protected from being struck, right? So if we're going to be burying the wire, make sure we use the appropriate wiring for that. Or if we're running wiring, under the underside of a deck or something like that, we'll see that a lot. And it's just the standard wiring you use inside your home. Yes, it works, but it's not right. It's not.
Should you be doing it? Well,
and we hear that a lot. Well, it works.
Yeah.
Well, it does work. Yes. It also poses some certain safety risks here as well. So here's a better way to do it, or the correct way to do it. And there's options. And I always tell people too, if Yes, renovations, they cost a lot. And if you're hiring out all the contractors come in and do it, and you're pulling your permits, the costs quickly, they quickly rise.
Yeah.
So there's ways to help curb those expenses sometimes. There's so much out there on the market now with solar lights. And even for exterior lighting on your home, where they're instead of having to maybe install different timers, they have photo cells on them. They have timers built into them now, so they can come on dusk to dawn. You drive up, you're coming home from work, your lights are already on for you automatically. So there's a lot of neat products out there. There's a lot of innovation that's come out in the last 5 years. You think about all the Google Nest thermostats and like it's the technology, it's always evolving. So I'm always going to the store to see what's new, just to kind of stay on top of it all, and as well for improvements to our own places, right?
Yeah, well, it's true. My sister's got a cottage in Quebec, and on their drive there, they can preheat the house by using their phones.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good thing to pretty good innovation.
Yeah, it's it makes you wonder how we live without them.
I know. Yeah. Sometimes all of those things are good, but sometimes there's too much of it too. But anyway, yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to bring that's been happening you want to bring to anybody's attention lately, or?
Right now in the city, we're seeing a lot of the water meters being upgraded in the homes.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So cities going around doing that, and you make your appointment and they're there for about an hour. I've had mine done now. And I always tell people it's a great time to go down there and maybe just see what they're doing, ask a couple questions. One of the things we talk about lots with, and it comes with electrical, is bonding. It's similar to grounding, but there's a lot of depending how the home was wired, a lot of times the older homes, the grounding wire from the electrical panel would go to your copper plumbing lines. But then we brought in water meters, and now they're installed. As soon as the water comes in the home, there's your water meter, but now your grounding wire is above that. So when these people are in doing the work and doing the upgrades, they pull the water meter out. Now you have that disconnect in that plumbing. So now you have no effective grounding on your home while they're doing the water meter upgrade. So that's where we should have a jumper cable from the above the water meter going below the water meter. It's two grounding clamps and a length of grounding wire, and that problem's resolved. The people doing this work now, they probably won't be able to do that on site for you, but at least they can let you know if you have that in place or not. These are people that are well-versed in plumbing, well-versed in electrical, and they can at least let you know if your grounding is adequate for your home, or if you need to do that upgrade. But it's amazing how many times we're out there and we're in homes, and it's based on when they were built, right? Code was different. That's what we're here talking about a little bit today, right? Safety and with respect to electrical, and it's a simple fix. I think maybe the parts would cost you $40 to buy the parts, and then just the labor to have it installed. So it's not an expensive upgrade to the home, but then it gives you that you and your appliances and everything in your home, that protection, so everything's properly grounded. 5-minute fix and it's done.
Yeah, good to know. Yeah, I'll have to follow up on mine. I don't know what they did. I know they had to come back, and it wasn't just a one-shot deal. They had to come back and do something.
They did. Yeah.
So
it must be a tough job for someone, because I know when we're inspecting sometimes these water meters over the years, in the basements, they're originally readily available, like out exposed, and now we frame them in, we do some nice drywall, and everything's blocked. Access has been denied.
Well, and you should know where your water meter is in the house, where the main shutoff is. I've actually, one of the houses we had, I think there was a set of clamps on it or something, because the thing was broken. I don't know. Anyway, but I mean, over time, you're right, they're all hidden, and it's hard to access, and you're trying to figure out where is that water meter. But well, that's great information again, Cory. It's always great talking to you and keeping up to date on the issues that are out there. And definitely electrical is always one of those things that people are, that's why you hire somebody like you to have a look at the property and determine if there's some issues, for sure.
Yeah, it's a big part of the home, right? And it's huge with safety, and it's it's a part that I won't say it gets overlooked. Everyone's always concerned about the panel,
Yeah,
but the rest of the electrical throughout the home is equally just as important. So, yeah.
great.
All right.
Well, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you again in a month and see what else has come up.
Yeah, sounds good. Enjoy your June. Enjoy beginning of summer.
Oh my goodness, it's so hard to believe it's already the middle of June almost. Anyway, take care.
You
Yeah,
too.
bye.
Bye now.